London is a global financial center, has been for 300 years. I care most that we keep customer service front and center. It is the best job I've had in my life and the hardest, most difficult job I've had in my life.
When C.S. Venkatakrishnan was starting out, the corner office wasn't exactly on his radar. His sights were set on academia.
I wanted to be a professor in a business school. I graduated during the first Bush recession to 1991, and finding a job was hard. So an academic job.
The young man known simply as Venkat grew up in India before moving to America for school.
I was very fortunate, but whatever self-esteem I had, I lost within 2 days of coming to MIT.
He went on to earn both a master's and a PhD at MIT, diving deep into applied math, statistics, and probability. Those skills helped him land a job on Wall Street.
All my friends are in finance. Apparently they use math in finance. I'd taken a few classes at MIT, so I applied for a job on Wall Street. I got one finally at JPMorgan.
Venkat quickly rose through the ranks of JPMorgan, taking on senior roles in asset management, investment banking, and risk. Eventually, he became Chief Investment Officer for Global Fixed Income at the bank. Then in 2016, he made another major move, this time across the Atlantic.
I got this opportunity to be Chief Risk Officer at Barclays. And I said to myself, I've been 22 years in an organization, a great organization, which gave me a lot of opportunity, which taught me a lot. And I thought I needed to try something different, and if I didn't do it, I would never do it.
And he never looked back. Today, Venkat is CEO of Barclays, Britain's second largest bank. Barclays has a long history, dating all the way back to 1690, when John Freem and Thomas Gould opened up shop as Goldsmith bankers on London's Lombard Street. Now it's a global operation, with a presence in 38 countries and approximately 91,000 employees. It's also the last major European lender still competing on Wall Street. Since taking the helm, Venkat steered the company through the COVID-19 pandemic and the rising interest rates that followed. And today, Venkat says his journey all started with one life-changing opportunity.
I came as a student from India. I came to MIT. I've had a career in finance, in institutions in the US and in the UK. I valued that opportunity, and I would want to give it to anybody who came.
Okay, so if you're a customer, let's suppose but you're an average person living in London, and you have a chance to go to many different banks, HSBC, Barclays, Lloyds, others. Why should somebody want to use Barclays as their main bank?
You should use us as your main bank because we're pretty good at banking. We try to spend a lot of money on technology, on customer service to make the journey easy. And I would say, David, there's a philosophy to banking. I view it for people that you've got two important goals in life, typically. You've got your personal well-being, which is spiritual, physical health. You've got your financial well-being, which supports your personal well-being. And it's a really important role for those of us in the financial sector, for those of us in banks, to be privileged enough to help service your and grow your financial well-being. And hopefully that attitude suffuses what we do in Barclays.
Now, since the Great Recession and post-COVID as well, the American banks, a lot of them, have gotten much, much stronger, much bigger. And they are much more dominant in the global financial scene than I think they were pre-global recession. Is that a problem for the British-based banks?
It's not a problem. What it does is that it makes certain parts of our businesses more competitive. You know, London is a global financial center, has been for 300 years. We look to represent London in the globe as an investment bank. And then, even though banking has become transnational, in the last 5 to 7 years post-COVID, around COVID, banking has also become much more national. And so retail banking is much more national than it used to be even 10 or 15 years ago.
Who is your biggest competitor in the retail banking, commercial banking business in Europe?
In the UK, which is where we are primarily, it's Lloyds and NatWest.
Okay, and why are you better than those two?
They're both equally good banks. They're very good banks. I think if you come with Barclays, one of the advantages you get besides the retail is the fact, and we've had many companies have done it, and individuals, that you can grow from a very small account to a very large account. We can manage your business. We can ultimately take you public. We can do derivatives for you. We can do foreign exchange for you. We're a full-service bank around the world.
Now, do you have a big private wealth division as well to manage people's money?
Yes, we do.
And to have an account there, how much money do you need to have? If you want to, somebody wants to have their money managed by Barclays, you need to have £1 million or £5 million?
It's typically £3 to £5 million. £3
to £5 million.
Yeah.
Okay. And if I come to you and say, I met you, I interviewed you, I think you're a great CEO, I want to be using your bank for my private wealth, and I'll give you £5 million, what kind of rate of return can you get for me? Can you guarantee for me?
Well, with your risk preference, if we start and we put it in, sterling deposits, we can certainly give you 5%.
5%?
Yeah.
But suppose I say I have a high risk tolerance and I'm willing to take a lot of risk.
Then we will put you in Carlyle hedge funds or private equity funds.
So you get a 50% rate of return. Okay.
Absolutely.
That's good. Okay. Let me ask you today, what is the biggest problem facing the UK economy?
Growth. It has suffered after Brexit and the disruption of trade relations with Europe. I mean, they are still there, but it has more friction in it. It is a country that has been growing at approximately 0 to 1%. And for all the advantages it has, it can grow much more. And it needs the investment to grow. It needs the investment in human capital, in infrastructure, and in companies to engender that growth. And that is, I think, the single biggest problem.
So today, would you say, or is it not appropriate for business leaders in England to say that Brexit was a mistake?
I think Brexit has, in the long run, damaged the UK economy, yeah.
But nobody will say, let's have a vote to go back into the EU because nobody wants to admit they made a mistake, or why won't you have another vote?
Having had Brexit, so to take back a little of what I said, having had Brexit, the UK has a freedom in its economic policy and its trade relationships that it would not have had under Brexit. In the current environment, that could be an advantage if it takes advantage of it.
Okay. So right now, what do people think in England of the U.S. tariff policy?
They're worried about it. They're happy that, at least until the pause came, that they were at 10%, which was a lower number. And I think they're happy that they can negotiate that number differently from Europe, of which once they were part.
So today, would you say that the UK is feeling more aligned with the countries on the continent of Europe, or still more aligned with its great partner, the United States?
I think they see the long-run future for the UK as much better off with the alignment with the US. It's a special relationship. When I think about Barclays, we've been around for 330 years, and our US relationship is very strong. Ben Franklin had an account with us.
For, I'd say, about a century or so, the reserve currency of the world was the British pound. And then the United States more or less replaced that, I'd say, after World War II, probably. But now the dollar is under attack a bit. We've lost 3% of our value from the peak. Do you think the dollar will remain the only reserve currency in the world? And are you as comfortable with the dollar as you used to be?
Absolutely. Actually, if you wanted to go further back, you could say it's almost after World War I, when the US had lent money to Europe and the UK for ammunition and so on, and then they had to get paid back in dollars. And that's when the strength of the dollar really began. So it's 100 years, 80 years, 100 years of dollar strength, so much so that important commodities, gold, oil, are denominated in dollars. Dollars are part of the payment system. When countries talk to each other, they represent their GDP and various figures in dollars. I think undoing that will take a long, long time. And 3% in foreign exchange terms is not that much.
Okay, so you think the dollar will stay as the reserve currency of the time being?
Absolutely.
So the main business of banks historically has been to lend money to people that need money, and that's still, I assume, your main business is lending money. So in recent years, the private equity firms and special organizations have been set up that are now called private credit firms. They lend money without the federal regulatory oversight that you often have. So do you feel it's unfair for private equity firms to be able to lend money without government regulatory oversight? Or do you think it's just a fair fight and you can win this fight?
First of all, let me say that I have unending respect for private equity firms and for their managers.
Particularly the founders. Right.
And the founders more than anybody else.
Right, of course.
Look, I think it's a fair fight. Credit has to be has to be available in the economy, and if people are willing to provide credit, so be it. Banks have historically provided credit, but banks have also for many years been, while originating credit, we've been selling the credit to other people and holders of credit. Private equity firms sometimes are buyers of that credit, sometimes they originate it themselves. If it ever rises to the point where it touches or creates in itself a systemic risk, then it's really important to regulate it. I don't think today it's at that point.
Right. So what is the biggest problem that you face as CEO? Is it dealing with regulatory oversight of things in the United States, dealing with problems in England, dealing with other issues? What are your biggest problems?
So the biggest issue with a bank is that it is a very large part of the global economic system and of the economic systems in the countries in which it operates. So yes, you've got to obey all the rules and you've got to run yourself well because we are a critical part of national infrastructure. Safety and soundness is really important, and I spend a lot of time on that because that is basic. On top of that, you've got to adjust the way you run your business. You've got to construct it so that it's robust across different environments, and you've got to then run it to adjust to changes in those environments. And that keeps you on your feet.
As you look out on the global economic challenges the world is now facing, what are you most worried about in terms of the economic challenges?
So I'm actually taking a long view on this one. I think we've had 30 years, if you go for World War II, from 1945 to the mid-80s, you had one order in the world, a Cold War-induced order. China was out of it. And you had the East and the West. Then the Soviet Empire broke up. China enters the world system. The world becomes more integrated from the late 80s to, let's say, 2020. And now what you're seeing is a very different form of the world, which could become more separated. Multilateral institutions and relationships become bilateral. How that happens and what the role is for individuals, countries, governments, and companies in that is what I worry about. And it's not a day-to-day or month-to-month, but it's probably a few years. I thought I needed to try something different, and if I didn't do it, I would never do it. It is the best job I've had in my life and the hardest, most difficult job I've had in my life.
Barclays is a bank that's started when? When is Barclays started as a bank in England?
1690.
1690.
330 years old.
Okay. And so it basically is a large retail bank in England,
yes,
more or less. But you have a big presence in the United States because, among other things, you bought Lehman, the investment banking part of Lehman. And I forget, you paid about $2 billion for it?
Approximately.
And it's worth a lot more now, right?
Yeah, I mean, our investment banking business makes us about £12 billion annually in top-line revenue.
So in investment banking, though, you're competing against JPMorgan, your old employer, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, among others. Is it easy for Barclays to compete against those other organizations?
It's a very difficult market, but Barclays has some unique skills. I think when we bought Lehman, we didn't just buy a business and we didn't just buy bankers and products and people. We bought a culture and mindset of investment banking, which was first rate. So while we're not as big in areas as some of these banks are, we think we're very good at what we do, and clients like working with us.
Let me ask you, where were you born?
I was born in Mysore, which is a small town in the deep south of India.
Okay, and what did your parents do?
So my father worked for the Indian government in the finance ministry. My mother was a homemaker, though I think she was smarter and better educated than he was.
And did you have siblings?
I have one sister.
Okay, and you must have been reasonably good in school because you went all the way from India to MIT, which is not that easy to do, I assume, in those days.
I was very fortunate, but whatever self-esteem I had, I lost within 2 days of coming to MIT.
Because you got there and you realized these people were really, really, really smart.
Yes.
So did you think they were as good as you thought they were going to be, or much better than you thought they were going to be?
Much, much better. And for a while, I thought I was much worse than I actually was.
Okay, so what did you major in?
So I was an applied math major, basically. I was an undergraduate, and I dabbled in computer science and economics and management science, operations research. And then I did a PhD in operations research, which is basically applied math, statistics, probability.
Okay, so you stayed at MIT, you got a PhD. All right, so after you get your PhD in applied math?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you say, I want to go be a professor in applied math, or do you say, no, I want to go do something important like go on Wall Street?
So I actually wanted to be a professor in operations research. I wanted to be a professor in a business school. I graduated during the first Bush recession, 1991. And finding a job was hard, so an academic job. So I ended up with a small consulting firm in Silicon Valley, where I learned a lot, but it became defunct fairly soon. And then 2 years or 3 years into it, I said, all my friends are in finance. Apparently, they use math in finance. I'd taken a few classes at MIT. So I applied for a job on Wall Street. I got one finally at JPMorgan, yeah.
Okay, so you went to JPMorgan. How long were you at JPMorgan?
22 years, 14 years in asset management, and the rest in the investment bank and risk.
Okay, did you ever meet Jamie Dimon?
I have had the pleasure, yeah.
And you'd think he was actually a good banker or not that great?
I think he's the finest banker of our generation.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. So at one point, after you're there for 22 years, you get an offer to go to Barclays Bank.
Yes. I had never thought of leaving JPMorgan. I got this opportunity to be Chief Risk Officer at Barclays. And I said to myself, I've been 22 years in an organization, a great organization, which gave me a lot of opportunity, which taught me a lot. And I thought I needed to try something different. And if I didn't do it, I would never do it.
All right, so you go over to Barclays in London. And what was your initial job?
I was the Chief Risk Officer of the bank.
All right, but eventually you became the CEO.
Yes, I did.
And how long have you been the CEO?
3.5 years now.
And is it more challenging than you thought, or not such a tough job?
It is the best job I've had in my life and the hardest, most difficult job I've had in my life.
Okay, and you have children?
I have 3 daughters, yes.
And any of them want to go into finance?
Thankfully, no.
Okay, so today, how do you think Fintech is going to change the world of banking in the next 10 or 15 years?
Well, I think what we've seen already is just going to be more of the same. You know, as you said, banks lend money, they store money, they move money, right? Now, that's important as part of your overall financial well-being. So the basic actions of, can I look at my statement, can I move money, can I, can I do payments, can I organize my financial life, all that is going to be done digitally. And the fintechs, frankly, have been beating the banks at it, and even lending small amounts of money. I think as people get wealthier and they want advice and they want to know whether it's an individual or a company, then you need the human being. And it's harder to see fintechs displace that.
Today, in Barclays, what is the biggest single challenge you worry about?
I care most that we keep customer service front and center. Because I think it's very easy when you work in a large organization to become abstracted from what the ultimate goal is, which is to serve your customers. You can spend your time on tech projects, you can spend your time on markets, you can spend your time thinking about the things that are proximate to you, but not proximate to the customer. That's what I always worry about. So we're living in this divide. But we continue to believe that ultimately climate change is something that is real.
So for people who are watching who want to know what they might do with their money, let's suppose people don't know about private wealth management and they're not really that financially sophisticated. What do you think the average person, middle-class person, should do with his or her money?
So I think if you're an average person, depending on your age, you should always keep in cash or something safe as much money as you need for a couple of months of your expenses, 2, 3, 4 months. Above that, you should have some amount in what we call fixed income markets, the bond markets. And the rest you should put in equities. And in all of this, the equities you do in an S&P 500 fund, and the bonds you can do in something like the Bloomberg aggregate, which used to be called the Lehman aggregate and the Barclays aggregate, and then cash in a bank.
So why should some young professional graduating from MIT or any college, Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, any school you want to mention, why should they want to go into commercial banking? Why not go into something more exciting or sexy like private equity?
if you come into mainstream banking today, we're going through a huge technology revolution. We've got to do better in the way in which we interact with clients. I think if you like economics, and if you like the macroeconomy, and if you like helping businesses, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, large businesses succeed, then a bank is a great place to work because you learn about the inner workings of the financial system. Not that you don't in private equity, right, but a bank is a good place.
As you look back on your career, if you had to do anything differently, what would you do differently? Would you still stay at JPMorgan? Would you have gone to Harvard, not MIT?
Harvard is tempting, but only that. I'm very glad I went to MIT. I learned humility more than anything else. I think I would have learned more when I was younger about the technology of banking. I came late to it. And I would have learned more when I was younger. I grew up on the institutional side. And the institutional side can be abstract. You're dealing with interest rates and currencies and derivatives and so on. I would have learned more about the retail side to give me an appreciation, right, that at the end of the day, it's about individuals, investors, retirees, company employees, whatever. I came later to that.
What is an area of great growth in the future that you think is going to be one that people like you should get into?
I certainly think life sciences and biotech. I think it feels very much that we're, even though we've seen so much in advances in medical technology, that there will be much more to come. I think parts of technology still in software and in hardware. And I think, by the way, sustainability and sustainability-linked technologies, they will be important in the long run.
So let me ask you about climate change. Many banks have adopted policies that were kind of to promote the idea that we should do something about climate change. Now the United States government seems to be not recognizing climate change. Has it changed your policies at all in the way you look at climate change, or you're not really that involved in that issue?
So well, look, we are involved in that issue. We're the largest investment bank outside of the US. So we've always had a presence in the US, including a presence in the energy business and the traditional energy business. There was a time early last year when we got banned from muni underwriting by the state of Texas, and the same week for being too green. And we got banned by Cambridge University in the UK, who was a 200-year-old client, because we were not green enough. So we're living in this divide. But we continue to believe that ultimately climate change is something that is real. We think that there will continue to be a growth in sustainable and renewable energy, and we want to be part of financing that. But we believe there's a transition. You can't get out of oil overnight.
Hey, another policy that is under some attack in the United States is something called DEI. Do you have DEI policies, and now have you had to change them, or because you're a British bank, you don't feel compelled to change your DEI policies?
So just a couple of weeks ago, we made adjustments to our policy in the United States and for our operations here. What we removed were specific gender and diversity-related targets which we had for employees. So meaning X% of women in senior management positions and so on in the US. We've kept them outside the US, although we're looking at them. But, you know, Barclays has operated around the world for many, many years. We operate, and you've got to conform to local laws wherever you are. The laws in the US are changing. So we've got to comply with that, and that's what we're doing. But I think our eternal values remain the same, which is of inclusivity, of opportunity, of talent, and getting the best people from wherever you can get them. I came as a student from India. I came to MIT. I've had a career in finance in institutions in the US and in the UK. I valued that opportunity, and I would want to give it to anybody who came.